I'm Rabbi Sher here in Oakland, California. Today is Purim, the day when we read the book of Esther and celebrate the events in Shushan long ago when uh, the righteous Queen Esther and her uncle Mordecai saved the Jews from destruction by the bigoted Haman, who sought to destroy all of the Jewish people in the kingdom of Media and Persia, in the book of Esther in the Bible. Now, uh, there's a there, what I think is kind of the one of the climaxes, but sort of the turning point of the book is right in the middle. Esther chapter 4, verse 14. So what has happened is Esther is a Jewish woman who has gone undercover, is not sort of out of the closet as a Jewish person, and she won a beauty contest to be made queen, and the king, who's this sort of drunkard named Ahasuerus, um, the king marries her and gives her a life in the palace, and so she is a palace Jew. So she is not regularly in touch with the people out in the streets, although she is in touch with her uncle Mordecai. And Mordecai kind of brings messages between the people and Esther. Um, Esther hears about the decree of Haman to kill and destroy all of the Jewish people, and she knows that she probably has to do something about this, but she's afraid to go to the king, because if you come to the king uninvited, you could be put to death. And so Esther is at personal risk, but really the entire Jewish community in this whole kind of empire is very, very much at risk. And so Esther fears to go to the king at first. And Mordecai says to her this, amazing verse, chapter 4, verse 14. And Mordecai says to her, if you decide not to say anything, we'll be all right. I mean, deliverance will come to the Jews from another place, but you and your family will perish. And who knows, maybe it was just for this moment that you acceded to this level of power and privilege of being queen. And so I sort of adapted that a little bit into contemporary English, because I think in the American Jewish community today, we really need to pay attention to what Mordecai is saying to Esther. In some ways, in our American society today, we in the American Jewish community are Esther. Relatively speaking, despite the sort of horrifying resurgence of anti-Semitism ever since Donald Trump was elected, still, nevertheless, relatively speaking, the American Jewish community is in a place of relative power and privilege among minorities in this country. Most American Jews are white. Most American Jews are native-born citizens. And so our community is broad and includes people who aren't in those privileged groups as well. But as an American Jewish community, we have a significant amount of power and privilege in the United States of America today. And yesterday I was at ICE in San Francisco. I sat in immigration court because they needed clergy. We had a huge protest. If you saw my Facebook post, 300 people were there at noon, the scheduled time when I got there. There were half that number were still there at 4:30 p.m. So this is an enormous protest. We took over all 4 streets around the ICE building. Fantastic. People chained themselves together diagonally across the 4 intersections. Police did not intervene. San Francisco is a sanctuary city. California is a sanctuary state. Oakland, where I am now, is a sanctuary city. So I was very proud to see sanctuary in action there. That we were allowed to really shut down those streets, and we did. People marching in the middle of the street, people painting. I still have a little paint on my finger here. Um, and we painted across that intersection, Bay Area United Against ICE, Keep Families Together. And the separation of families is something the Egyptians did to the Jews as we sort of transition towards Passover. In Exodus chapter 1, you will see that the Egyptians separated Jewish families. I think that's in Rashi. And so we know that's wrong. The wholesale persecution of people just because of their ethnicity in this country. I'll tell you about the case I was in. A guy was on his way home from work in his car, and four ICE cars, like ICE police cars, surrounded his car while it was moving on the road, forced him off the road, forced him to pull over, almost causing an accident. With no warning, he was not read any rights. He was basically kidnapped out of that car, put in an unmarked vehicle. Officers on their way to take him to an ICE detention center stopped for coffee with this young man still handcuffed in the back of that car. That's the way they treat people. And he got bond yesterday, so he's going to finally get out of jail and be able to be with his four children, his four American citizen children. And that's the kind of breaking up families that just shows the abject cruelty of ICE, of the enforcers of this racist immigration regime that we have going on in this country today. If you don't believe it's racist, boy, I mean, come to one of these hearings and hear what people have gone through. Because human beings don't deserve to be treated that way, even if they do deserve to go to prison. And these are human beings who have done nothing wrong that would cause them to go to prison in a just society at all. So this is just so unacceptable. American Jews face anti-Semitism, but we are not being targeted by La Migra. We are not being targeted at this point in time by ICE. They're not barging into our houses. They're not waiting for parents outside schools when they drop off their kids, and then the kids are left without anybody. We in the American Jewish community have the power and privilege not to be treated that way by ICE. And we have significant political power and influence if we would use it. Now, I am part of a couple of American Jewish organizations and interfaith organizations. I mentioned Ben the Ark in particular that have been doing visibility activities in front of ICE and just making sure that people see that we are that the American Jewish community is here and is with immigrants. Unfortunately, however, most of the American Jewish community is not yet engaged. I don't think that's acceptable. Let me say that again. I don't think it's acceptable. And I'll tell you why on this Purim day. If the American Jewish community, with its amount of political influence, would speak on immigrants, would say that we ourselves in the American Jewish community are immigrants for the most part. If we would say that we know that the immigration laws that were passed in 1924 to curtail immigration into the United States were passed to keep us out. If we believed in never again, if we, instead of, talking a good game, if we would actually care about the fact that under this immigration regime, the MS St. Louis from Germany, a ship carrying, I believe, 938 Jewish immigrants, was turned around and forced to go back to Germany because of these laws. Because at that time, 80, 100 years ago, these laws were passed to keep us out because they didn't want us. We were the ones they didn't want. Now, it's people of a different religion and a different skin color. It's the Latinx community. It's the Muslim community that are bearing the brunt. Brown skinned people that are bearing most of the brunt of this immigration racism today. And let's not forget that black people are still being indiscriminately killed, both by police and by white supremacist killers who police don't seem to care to prevent. And that is, and all of that is unacceptable. Maybe, it's so interesting. The Book of Esther doesn't have the word, the name of God in it. There isn't any. God is not explicitly mentioned in the Book of Esther. One of the places where commentators have said that God comes in is in that verse that I said to you. Who knows? Maybe you have acceded to this power for just such a time as this. And that who knows, it's so interesting, who knows? Who indeed, who is it who knows, right? That may be one of the places where God actually does come into the Book of Esther. And who knows? Maybe it's for just this time in American history that American Jews have achieved the power and influence and privilege that we have achieved in this country. Maybe it's time for us to use it. Maybe instead of saying, oh, we have our own problems over here in our, local synagogues or whatever, maybe instead of saying, oh, well, synagogue should be a place where there isn't any politics, right? Where I don't have to be bothered by other people's problems. That's not religious. That's not religion. Maybe instead of having all of these excuses why we shouldn't do anything, look, I know you're afraid. It's scary, okay? It was scary to go into ICE. I get that. It's scary to paint the streets of San Francisco in front of the police officers. Okay, I know. It's normal people would be afraid to speak out. It's scary to face down the racists. I mean, boy, when you talk about this, you get just a load of crap from the white supremacist community and that wing of the far-right Jewish community that supports them. And that's scary. I get it. It's not easy. If you're a pulpit rabbi, you have to talk to, that person in your congregation who's angriest. I get it. It's scary. And Esther was afraid too. But make no mistake, if we do not speak as American Jews, as an American Jewish community, if we do not fully engage at every pulpit and every synagogue in this country, in every congressional district in this country, in every state in this country, if we fail to engage as an American Jewish community fully to the extent of our power, brown people will be all right. Deliverance will come from another place eventually. It'll be all right. But we will not, because our souls won't be all right. And so it's time for us to listen to Mordecai. It's time for us to go into that room that we have somehow gotten the privilege to go into, especially those of us who are white people as American Jews. It's time for us to insist with all of our power in the American Jewish community on and pro-immigrant immigration reform, on a Clean Dream Act, on having this country be once again welcome, so that once again the words of our American Jewish colleague Emma Lazarus will ring true about our country. These words, not like a brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land, here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name, Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities frame. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she with silent lips. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift my lamp, beside the golden door.